Marcus Johnson stood quietly in the center of the gleaming corporate lobby, clutching a small cardboard box filled with everything he owned at work. A framed photo of his 8-year-old daughter peeked out from the top beside a tiny green plant and a coffee mug that read "World's Best Dad." Around him, dozens of employees watched. Some whispered, some laughed. One woman smirked loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I told you he'd never make it here." A younger manager folded his arms and shook his head. "Should have seen this coming." Marcus didn't argue, he didn't yell. He simply looked down at the picture of his daughter, Zoe. She was the only reason he'd survived the last 5 years. 5 years of working overtime, 5 years of skipping vacations. 5 years of pretending the insults didn't hurt. Ever since his wife passed away from cancer, Marcus had raised Zoe completely alone. Every morning he woke up at 5:00 a.m., cooked breakfast, braided Zoe's hair himself after watching dozens of YouTube tutorials, packed her lunch, walked her to the school bus, then drove 45 minutes into downtown Chicago to work at one of the fastest-growing technology companies in America. He never complained, not once. Even when promotions somehow went to employees who produced half the results. Even when people joked behind his back because he always rushed home instead of joining happy hour. Even when coworkers called him the babysitter. Marcus smiled through it all, because his daughter mattered more than proving strangers wrong. But today, everything changed. The HR director stepped forward holding an envelope. "Marcus Johnson." He looked up calmly. "Yes. We're terminating your employment effective immediately." The lobby fell silent. The HR director continued reading from the paper. Repeated concerns regarding attitude. Marcus almost laughed. Failure to demonstrate leadership. He had personally trained nearly every employee standing there, and creating division within the workplace. Now he did laugh, not loudly. Just enough for everyone nearby to hear. The vice president frowned. "You think this is funny?" Marcus slowly shook his head. "No." He gently placed the envelope inside the cardboard box. "I just realized something." "What?" "I spent 5 years believing hard work always speaks for itself." Someone behind him whispered, "He's finally losing it." Another employee pulled out a phone, already recording. The vice president crossed his arms. "If you're finished, security will escort you outside." Marcus picked up his box, adjusted his jacket, then reached into his pocket, not for an argument, not for revenge, just for his phone. The entire lobby watched. He calmly unlocked it, scrolled once, pressed a single contact. The phone rang exactly once. A calm voice answered. "Good morning." Marcus smiled for the first time that day. "It's me." The voice immediately changed. "Marcus, is everything all right?" Marcus looked around the lobby. Every person who had laughed was still watching him. Then he quietly said 6 words that would change every life in that building. "I think it's time you came." Silence. The person on the other end replied, "I'll be there in 15 minutes." Marcus ended the call, put the phone back into his pocket, then walked toward the lobby exit. The vice president laughed. "Calling your lawyer." Marcus stopped, turned around, smiled. "No." He looked directly into the man's eyes. "I called someone who actually owns what's about to happen next." Then he walked outside, inside the building. No one had the slightest idea that the biggest mistake in the company's history had just been made. The heavy glass doors slid shut behind Marcus as he stepped into the cool Chicago morning. Rush hour traffic flowed past the towering office building, and for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about deadlines or meetings. He set the cardboard box on a nearby bench. Inside the lobby, however, the jokes had already started. "He really thought that phone call scared somebody," one employee laughed. The blonde marketing manager, Vanessa Collins, rolled her eyes. "People always pretend they have connections after they get fired." Several coworkers chuckled. Even the vice president, Richard Hale, couldn't hide his grin. "I've seen this before," he said confidently. "Someone gets fired, threatens lawsuits, makes dramatic phone calls, then disappears." The lobby slowly returned to normal. Employees headed toward the elevators. Receptionists answered phones. Security guards relaxed. Within 5 minutes, everyone had almost forgotten Marcus Johnson. Almost. Outside, Marcus looked at the family photo resting inside his box. It had been taken 2 years earlier at Zoe's elementary school. She had wrapped both arms around his neck after winning the science fair. "Daddy," she'd whispered that day, "You're my superhero." Marcus smiled. That sentence had carried him through some of the hardest nights of his life. He remembered sleeping in hospital chairs beside his wife, working 2 jobs after she passed away, selling his motorcycle just to pay medical bills, skipping meals so Zoe would never have to. People at work saw a quiet employee. They never saw the sacrifices back inside the building. Vanessa walked into the executive conference room. Richard was already there with several department heads. He tossed Marcus's personnel file onto the table. Problem solved. Someone asked, "What do we tell the board?" Richard shrugged, "That we removed an underperforming manager." Nobody questioned him. After all, Richard had been climbing the corporate ladder for nearly 20 years. He knew exactly how to make decisions sound reasonable, or so everyone believed, at that same moment. A black luxury SUV quietly turned onto the street. It wasn't speeding, no flashing lights, nothing dramatic, just a vehicle that somehow carried an unmistakable sense of importance. The driver checked the address. "Sir." The man in the back seat looked up from a tablet. "We've arrived." He closed the screen without saying a word, across the street. Marcus noticed the SUV. He didn't wave, he didn't smile, he simply stood. The vehicle stopped beside the curb. A sharply dressed older gentleman stepped out first, then another, then a woman carrying a leather portfolio. Finally, the rear passenger door opened. A distinguished man in his early 60s stepped onto the sidewalk. Gray hair, tailored navy suit, calm eyes, no security entourage, no unnecessary show of power. He walked straight toward Marcus without hesitation. He extended his hand. "Marcus." Marcus shook it. "Thank you for coming." The older man glanced toward the skyscraper. "I came as soon as you called." "You already know." Marcus nodded once. "They finally did it." The man sighed. "I was hoping they'd prove me wrong." Across the street, a receptionist happened to look through the lobby windows. She frowned. "Isn't that?" She leaned closer. "No." Another employee joined her. "What?" "I think I've seen that man before." "Who?" She couldn't remember, but his face seemed strangely familiar. Upstairs, Richard continued celebrating. "We'll announce the restructuring next week." Everyone nodded until his assistant hurried into the room. "Sir." He barely looked up. "What is it?" "You might want to come downstairs." Richard frowned. "I'm busy." "I really think you should come now." Her voice sounded nervous. That immediately caught his attention. "What happened?" She hesitated. "I'm not completely sure. But there are several luxury vehicles outside." Richard laughed. And she swallowed. "Some very important people are asking for you." The room suddenly became quiet. Richard stood. "Who are they?" "I don't know." They refused to give their names. The elevator doors opened moments later. Richard walked confidently into the lobby, then stopped. Standing near the entrance were 3 impeccably dressed executives. Behind them, the older gentleman Marcus had greeted only minutes earlier. Richard had never met him, yet something about him felt strangely familiar. He walked forward. "I'm Richard Hale, Vice President. Can I help you?" The older man smiled politely. "I'm sure you can." He reached into his jacket, produced a simple business card, and handed it over. Richard glanced at it. His confident smile vanished. The color drained from his face. His hands froze. Because printed beneath the man's name was the title that explained everything. Not CEO, not president, not investor, chairman of the parent holding company, the company that owned every single share of the corporation Richard believed he controlled. Richard looked up slowly. His mouth suddenly felt dry. The chairman's voice remained calm. "I believe," he said quietly, "we need to discuss why one of my most trusted people was escorted out of this building." The entire lobby fell silent. No one laughed anymore, and for the first time that morning, Marcus Johnson wasn't standing outside as a fired employee. He was standing there as the one person everyone suddenly realized they had never truly understood. Richard Hale stared at the business card as though it had suddenly become too heavy to hold. The logo on the card wasn't unfamiliar. It belonged to Sterling Capital Group, the private investment firm that quietly owned dozens of Fortune 500 companies. Including his own, his heartbeat quickened. He looked back at Marcus, then at the chairman, then back at Marcus again. Nothing made sense. "You," Richard stammered, "you know Mr. Whitmore." Marcus answered without a hint of pride. "I've known him for a long time." Richard forced an awkward laugh. There must be some misunderstanding. There isn't, the chairman replied. His voice wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. The entire lobby had become so silent that employees could hear the elevator doors opening behind them. Within seconds, more people gathered, receptionists, managers, interns, even security officers. Nobody wanted to miss whatever was happening. Vanessa folded her arms. So, who exactly is this guy? No one answered. The chairman slowly turned toward Marcus. I'm sorry you had to experience this. Marcus nodded. I hoped things would change. So did I. Richard interrupted nervously. If there's been a mistake, we can certainly discuss. The chairman raised one finger. Richard stopped talking immediately. I'll ask the questions. He looked around the lobby. Who authorized Mr. Johnson's termination? Richard swallowed. I did. Based on what evidence? Richard opened the personnel file. There were complaints. From whom? Our management team. What documented performance failures? Richard flipped through the pages. There were performance reviews, attendance records, department reports, but something felt wrong because none of them actually supported the decision. Instead, every report praised Marcus. Highest project completion rate, highest employee retention, highest customer satisfaction scores. The chairman looked at one report after another, then quietly asked, can someone explain why your highest performing operations manager was described as a leadership problem? Nobody spoke. An uncomfortable silence settled across the lobby. Finally, a young analyst stepped forward. His voice shook. Sir. Richard shot him a warning look. The analyst ignored it. Marcus trained almost everyone here. More employees nodded. He stayed late almost every night. He covered our shifts. He fixed problems no one else could. He even helped me after my father died. Vanessa looked shocked. You never told anyone that. The analyst smiled sadly. He never wanted credit. The chairman closed the personnel file, then turned toward Marcus. You never defended yourself. Marcus shrugged. I figured the truth eventually catches up. Richard couldn't believe what he was hearing. He'd expected Marcus to beg for his job. Instead, the man looked almost peaceful. Just then, the front doors opened again. This time, 3 black SUVs pulled into the circular driveway. Everyone inside the lobby instinctively looked outside. Several executives stepped out carrying briefcases. One of them approached the chairman. Sir. He handed over a sealed folder. The audit team is here. Richard frowned. What audit? The chairman looked directly at him. The one I authorized this morning. Richard's stomach dropped. This morning. Actually, the chairman corrected him. Last night. Marcus quietly watched everything unfold. He hadn't requested revenge. Richard Hale felt every eye in the lobby fixed on him. Only minutes ago, he had stood there with absolute confidence, convinced Marcus Johnson was just another employee who could be replaced by Monday morning. Now, the same employees who had laughed at Marcus were silently stepping away from Richard. No one wanted to stand beside him anymore. The chairman slowly handed the audit folder to one of Sterling Capital's investigators. Begin immediately. Yes, sir. Within seconds, 6 investigators entered the building carrying laptops, document cases, and identification badges. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't threaten anyone. They simply walked with the calm confidence of people who already knew exactly what they were looking for. The first shock. The lead investigator approached reception. I'll need access to every executive email account from the last 5 years. Richard's face tightened. That's confidential. The investigator didn't even look at him. It's company property. Another investigator spoke. We'll also need payroll records, promotion decisions, performance reviews, expense reports, and internal complaint files. Richard's breathing became noticeably heavier. Vanessa whispered, This can't actually be happening. It was. Marcus walks away, while chaos slowly unfolded inside the building. Marcus quietly picked up his cardboard box. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't celebrating. He simply turned toward the exit. The chairman noticed. Leaving already. Marcus nodded. I need to pick Zoe up from school. One investigator looked confused. Sir, shouldn't Mr. Johnson stay for the meeting? Marcus answered before the chairman could. My daughter has been waiting all week for us to have dinner together. He smiled gently. I've already missed too many evenings because of work. The chairman couldn't help smiling, still making the same choice. Every time, without another word, Marcus walked away not because he had won, but because, to him, being on time for his daughter mattered more than watching executives panic. A little girl waiting. Across town, 8-year-old Zoe sat on a bench outside her elementary school. Most of the children had already gone home. She kept looking toward the parking lot. Her teacher smiled. "Your dad's usually early." "He always is." Just then, Marcus's old pickup truck turned into the school driveway. The moment Zoe saw it, she jumped off the bench and ran as fast as she could. "Daddy." Marcus knelt down and caught her in a huge hug. "You came. I told you I would." She looked up at him. "You look happy." Marcus laughed softly. "I think today was the beginning of something better." She didn't ask questions, she simply smiled. "Can we get ice cream?" Marcus grinned. "I think we've earned it." Meanwhile, back at the company headquarters, the audit was moving much faster than Richard expected. One investigator raised his hand. "I found something." Everyone turned. Another investigator spoke from across the conference room. "So did I." Within 30 minutes, the conference table was covered with printed documents, promotion requests, internal complaints, anonymous employee surveys, exit interviews, financial approvals. One file after another revealed the same pattern. Qualified employees overlooked, friends of executives promoted, complaints ignored, performance scores changed without explanation. Richard stared at the growing pile of evidence. "No, this isn't..." But even he couldn't finish the sentence, because he knew some of those decisions had been his, others he had simply allowed to happen. Vanessa's realization. Vanessa quietly opened Marcus's personnel file again. This time, she wasn't looking for mistakes. She was looking for the man she had never bothered to know. She found volunteer records, mentorship awards, letters from employees thanking Marcus for helping them through personal struggles. One handwritten note caught her attention. "Marcus stayed with me until 2:00 a.m. after my husband had a heart attack. He finished my project so I wouldn't lose my job. It wasn't signed. It didn't need to be." Vanessa slowly closed the file, her eyes filled with tears. "I laughed at someone who was helping everyone." For the first time in years, she felt ashamed. The chairman speaks. Late that afternoon, every department head was called into the executive boardroom. No one spoke while they waited. The chairman stood at the front of the room. He didn't yell. He didn't pound the table. His calm voice carried more weight than anger ever could. "Culture." He paused. "That's what destroys companies." He looked around the room. Not competition. Not the economy. Not technology. He pointed toward Marcus's empty chair. "When good people stop feeling valued, your company starts dying." The room remained silent. "You didn't lose Marcus today. You lost him a long time ago." The final blow. An investigator entered carrying another folder. "Sir, we've completed the preliminary review." The chairman nodded. "What did you find?" The investigator took a deep breath. "We found enough evidence to recommend immediate removal of multiple executives." The room froze. Richard closed his eyes. He already knew. His name would be first on the list. The chairman slowly looked at him. "Richard, for years, you believed leadership meant having power over people." He paused, but Marcus proved something far more important. Real leadership is serving people so well that they would gladly follow you, even if you had no title at all. Richard had no response, because for the first time in his career, he realized the quiet man he had humiliated had been the true leader in the building all along. The boardroom was silent, not the ordinary silence of a business meeting. The kind of silence that follows when people realize their careers and their reputations may never recover. Richard Hale sat motionless at the end of the conference table. For the first time in 23 years, he had no speech prepared, no excuse, no one to blame. The chairman slowly closed the audit folder. "This is only the preliminary report." He looked around the room. "And it's already one of the worst leadership failures I've seen in years." No one dared to speak. The phone call that changed the company. The chairman picked up his phone. "I'd like to schedule an emergency board meeting." He listened for a moment. Immediately, within an hour, every board member of Sterling Capital had joined the meeting through a secure video conference. Faces from New York, Dallas, San Francisco, Boston appeared on the massive screen. One director spoke first. Is the situation really that serious? The chairman answered calmly, it's worse. He held up Marcus's personnel file. Our highest performing operations manager was fired this morning. Another board member frowned. For misconduct. No, for doing his job too well. Several directors exchanged confused looks. The chairman continued. He trained employees. He solved problems. He increased profits. He mentored young staff. And despite all of that, he became the target of executives who valued politics over performance. The room fell silent. Zoe's surprise. Meanwhile, Marcus and Zoe sat in their favorite neighborhood diner. Nothing fancy, just a small family restaurant where everyone knew their names. Zoe happily dipped French fries into ketchup. So, she smiled. How was work today? Marcus looked at her, then laughed. I don't think I work there anymore. She blinked. They fired you. Marcus nodded honestly. They did. For a brief moment, her smile disappeared. Are we going to lose our house? Marcus reached across the table and held her hand. No. Are we going to be okay? He smiled. We've always been okay. She thought quietly for a second. Then she said something Marcus would never forget. You always tell me that people can't take away who we are. Marcus felt his throat tighten. I did say that. She grinned, so we're still us. He couldn't stop smiling. Exactly. Around them, no one realized they were watching a father and daughter whose simple conversation carried more wisdom than all the meetings taking place downtown. The decision. Back at headquarters, the board meeting lasted nearly 3 hours. Every department was reviewed, every complaint reopened, every executive questioned. Finally, the chairman stood. I'd like to make a motion. The screen became quiet, effective immediately. Richard Hale is relieved of all executive responsibilities. Richard slowly lowered his head. He didn't argue. He knew there was nothing left to say. The chairman continued. 3 additional executives will also be dismissed. Vanessa closed her eyes. She wasn't one of them. But she knew she had been part of the culture that allowed it to happen. An unexpected request. One board member asked, what about Marcus Johnson? Another smiled. I assume we'll offer him a senior executive role. The chairman nodded. I already have. Everyone waited, but he probably won't accept. A director looked surprised. Why not? The chairman smiled. Because Marcus has always measured success differently than the rest of us. The visit. The next morning, Marcus was helping Zoe finish her science project at the kitchen table. A knock came at the front door when Marcus opened it. The chairman stood outside. No cameras, no reporters, just him. Marcus smiled. You didn't have to come all this way. I know, but some conversations deserve to happen face to face. They sat on the front porch while Zoe painted her project inside. The chairman handed Marcus a folder. We'd like you to come back. Marcus looked at it, same position. The chairman laughed softly, not even close. Inside the folder was an offer to become vice president of culture and employee development for every company Sterling Capital owned. It was a role that would influence tens of thousands of employees across the country. Marcus quietly closed the folder. I appreciate it, but I have one condition. The chairman smiled. I was expecting that. I leave every day at 4:30, so I can pick up my daughter. The chairman laughed. Done. And no weekend meetings. Done. And if another single parent needs flexibility. They get it. The chairman extended his hand. That's exactly why we need you. Marcus shook it for the first time in years. He wasn't accepting a job. He was accepting the chance to make sure no one else would be treated the way he had been. The company changes. Over the following months, everything began to look different. Anonymous complaints were taken seriously. Managers received leadership training. Mentorship programs expanded. Employee turnover dropped to its lowest level in company history. Productivity increased. Customer satisfaction reached record highs. But the biggest change couldn't be measured on a spreadsheet. People smiled more. They listened more. They respected one another. The company finally understood. A healthy culture wasn't a luxury. It was the foundation of every success that followed. One final moment. Several months later, Marcus stood in the same lobby where he had once been humiliated. This time, new employees gathered for orientation. Marcus looked around the room, then began with a simple sentence. You'll never be judged here by your title. It's only by how you treat people. The room was silent, not because anyone was afraid, but because everyone believed him. Outside, Zoe waited in the parking lot after school. Marcus checked his watch. 4:28 p.m. He smiled, closed his laptop, and walked out the front doors just as he had promised, because promotions come and go, companies rise and fall. But a little girl only gets one childhood, and Marcus Johnson had learned long ago that the greatest success in life is becoming the person your child is proud to call Dad. Life is becoming the person your child is proud to call Dad.